that lucky enough to follow that guy, but maybe I could borrow the shirt. That might help me out a little bit. And what I'll talk about a little bit is 5 years that I spent following and living in and breathing in the Skunk Works history of peer-to-peer anti-piracy. The first premise of this talk is that information wants to be free, and there's lots of great examples of that. Kazaa, Napster, now we have BitTorrent, Pirate Bay. Before that, in the old days, we had this thing called Usenet that we used to like to use to pirate media and files and movies and all kinds of stuff. But the second premise is that information loves to be corrupted. Here we have a couple of synthetic images, things you might never really see, the Loch Ness Monster, George Bush reading a book. Then we have a Trojan horse, which is intended to corrupt software. So information loves to be corrupted. Back to peer-to-peer piracy. This is obviously has been a huge problem for the past decade, and the movie industry and the recording industry have had a lot to say. And if there's something that they don't want to have happen, they don't want to have their information become free. So if you look at what the MPAA has done, the RIAA has done, they've had to play the heavies in this drama, along with the software industry, and they put ISPs and universities smack dab in the middle of the controversy. And the people that suffer in the end are the consumers. The technological side of it is that digital rights management has largely been a failure. Digital copies are still perfect. One crack by somebody usually in Finland or Norway creates a global pandemic, and any digital rights management system, it fails globally. So, discontinuous innovation. I was watching an episode of The Simpsons one day, and this one in particular, and I had an idea that was a little different, I'll say, and I'll describe it here in a second. Basically, the idea was to make looking for music and movies like looking for a needle in a haystack. Basically, you flood a peer-to-peer network with dozens, hundreds, thousands, millions of decoys that look like a genuine article, but when somebody downloads them, they get white noise, they get something else. This is the co-inventor that I took the idea to. The first thing I told him, first thing he told me was, why would you want to do this? The second thing he told me was, it would never work. The third thing he told me 2 hours later was, it works. And so we set about developing the technology. In the meantime, several artists started flooding networks with their own decoys. I downloaded an M&M file and played it for a week before somebody told me, dude, that's not a real song, that's a decoy. I couldn't tell the difference. Along the way, several people decided they could make money off of this model, and so a number of companies started what became quite the cottage industry. Media Defender was the first one, Overpeer followed, and there were a couple of other serious players. Recording artists would hire them to spoof the networks. So we developed something. We took a very simple and elegant idea and turned it into something that only an attorney could love, which would be a patent application. It was fairly sophisticated, and I couldn't even read it when we finished with it. It issued in May 2004. It must have been a slow news day because we were in the New York Times. We were interviewed by Wired. We were hung in effigy on Slashdot. We were the most hated men on the internet for about 15 or 20 minutes. And this spurred a whole area of DRM called speed bump DRM. The basic idea is to make piracy problematic, to make it just annoying enough that you'll just go out and spend the 99 cents that it takes to actually buy something. The underlying principle is economics. It's still an interesting idea. There are a number of dirty tricks that people in this industry use. Spoofing I've already described. The basic principle is if you can't beat them, join them, and join them, and join them, and join them. There is another technique that is called interdiction, and it's right here. And this is a little more ham-handed attempt. You're basically DOSing somebody that is sharing copyrighted media. You find that you issue a query for something, they have it, you issue a million requests for that, and you basically flood their queues with requests to download things. Swarming is a predatory type of technique that relies on multi-source downloads instead of spoofing an entire file. All you have to do is spoof a fragment of the file. Much more economical than full-blown file spoofing. It relies on a technology called true names that uses the hash of a file, not really the hash, but something close to it, as the file identifier. A lot of people in the peer-to-peer community mistakenly thought this added integrity to the peer-to-peer file system. Not so. Swarming actually exploits it, and spoofing doesn't care about it. Where are we now? Patent was sold to a company, to Overpeer. Overpeer immediately filed bankruptcy because they paid too much for the patent. And then Nokia acquired Overpeer. AltNet, which ran Kazaa, now has a royalty-free license to the patent. Why would they want that? Because they've turned this DRM model into a promotion model. So now they can basically spam their own networks with advertising for their clients. I think I'm done.